So our last speaker of this session is actually David Hart himself. And David is a senior scientist with the University of Wisconsin Aquatic Sciences Center, and he serves as the Assistant Director for Extension at the University of Wisconsin Sea Grant Institute. His research and outreach occur at the intersection of geographic information science, urban planning, and coastal management. David directs a staff of outreach specialists who extend coastal science throughout Wisconsin and the Great Lakes region in North America. So I think, David, you know the drill at this stage. You have a total of 13 minutes, including questions.
Great, thank you so much. I believe the organizers are going to put my slides. There they are. All right, so I would like to share some work on our Coastal Web Atlas, and particularly as we try to move towards that atlas supporting adaptive coastal management. If we could go to the next slide. And so I'm going to give a little bit of background about our atlas and some recent changes that have happened over the last couple of years. To talk in one slide about adaptive management and how it relates to coasts and GIS, and then talk a little bit about what might be coming for our atlas. I share a slide here of our coastline in Wisconsin on the Laurentian Great Lakes, and we have a coastline on Lake Michigan and Lake Superior and 15 counties in our state that border there. Next slide, please. So I wanted to kind of go back to the very beginning, and it relates to ICAN, about how our atlas got started. And I had a chance to go to a meeting about 15 years ago in Portland, Oregon, and sit in on a session that Don Wright helped to organize. And that was sharing the results of the first couple of ICAN meetings that happened in Ireland and in Oregon. And I came away from that presentation really feeling like a coastal atlas would really help us pull together a variety of GIS projects that we worked on for the previous 10 years. And particularly, I saw an interoperability use case that was being developed to address coastal erosion. And we have serious coastal erosion issues and a workforce that's addressing those and data needs there, and saw that an atlas could be really useful in that regard. Next slide, please. And so we started this, and at Sea Grant, we fund coastal research. And so we started our atlas not necessarily to build the atlas, but to study the research issues associated with developing a coastal spatial data infrastructure. It started as a 2-year research project with Professor Steve Ventura. And we started with strong collaboration with Oregon. We were really impressed with Oregon's atlas and how it was organized, and had a chance to work with Tanya Haddad and Dawn Wright on how to guide our atlas. And we addressed some research topics related to how do we design and evaluate atlases, what are some of the best tools for web cartography that we could use in these atlases, and how do we work towards distributed data and interoperability of those data sets being relevant to issues in the broader Great Lakes. And then in a second phase, we really moved more towards decision tools and how could we think about, build, and improve decision tools that were available to our coastal managers. And this graphic here shows one of the examples of the publications that came out related to best practices for web maps. Next slide. And so I just wanted to give a screenshot of kind of how our atlas started out. This was the initial look of our atlas, and it very much mirrored kind of 4 elements of Oregon's coastal atlas: maps, a data catalog, a gateway to decision tools, and a way to learn more about coastal issues. And we're really focused on place-based learning in that learn section. And we'll jump to the next slide. And that'll show us kind of the new look. So a lot of the same modules are there with a little bit of a new look. We ended up a couple years ago migrating from an older Microsoft-based content management system to WordPress, and gave us a little bit of a new look and feel, and maybe easier maintenance in maintaining our atlas as we go forward. Next slide. And so just a few of the resources here. One of the key features is in those primary elements, we have featured resources, kind of a little bit more of a graphic visual look at about a dozen or so prominent maps or tools or catalogs or learning resources. And those are represented as cards, if you know the technology of WordPress, and lets us kind of give a little bit more of a visual feel. And then there's a lot more resources available, a lot more maps out there from both a state perspective, a Great Lakes perspective, a national, even international perspective. And we have a way to be able to search for those, a filtered search. It kind of links into a Google spreadsheet where it's pretty easy for us to be able to add new resources. So those are kind of how the 4 modules of our Atlas, kind of the main elements of those work. Next slide. And then we added a new module called Topics, and we were very much influenced by the NOAA Digital Coast and their topics section. We added that about 3 or 4 years ago, and we developed, and the NOAA Digital Coast presents topics as a way to be able to look through a subject like coastal water quality or through climate adaptation or whatever, to be able to kind of get at the combination of tools and maps and learning resources and data that could help you be able to understand that issue is a bit more of a targeted focus. And so as a part of a NOAA funded regional coastal resilience project in southeastern Wisconsin around the Milwaukee area, we developed 4 topics around the key issues of that resilience project. And then through mentoring students associated with environmental and informatics programs here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, we developed 2 more recently. One addressed nearshore freshwater habitats, and another one focused on Green Bay, one of our larger estuaries and bays on the Great Lakes and Lake Michigan. Next slide, please. So just one slide here to talk about something that could take probably an hour or 2 to talk about, but then that's adaptive management. And just to distill it down to one bullet in a slide, adaptive management would allow incremental actions to be able to be taken around a resource management issue while continually collecting more information to reduce that uncertainty. We never have all the information we need to guide the management we want. So we've got to go out and gather that information. And coasts are a great place to be able to test that out because they're very dynamic and constantly need new and fresh information. And so adaptive coastal management would really benefit from having effective ways to discover, acquire, generate, integrate, visualize, and analyze data from multiple sources kind of on the fly. And coastal web atlases, I believe, are kind of a good technology to be able to do that. And so I've been following a little bit of literature kind of lightly here. I've shared some of it at the bottom. There'll be a link at the end of my presentation if you want to dive more deeply into the adaptive management literature and be able to get at some of these citations. Next slide, please. And so, then I wanted to think a little bit about how we could make our Atlas better to support the more dynamic on the fly types of analyses that we might need to. And so that's through a variety of different ways. One of them is research that I just presented recently at the Coast GIS conference on a competitive analysis and user survey of 10 state atlases around the United States. And that we analyzed the atlases, and then we kind of asked users of those atlases some questions, and that is helping to guide us. And then we also learned from finding those innovative atlases out there and those other examples of really impressive use of web cartography and visualization. We're also guided by partnership and collaboration opportunities, and then we have to, it's largely me and students maintaining this atlas. And so anything that can make the management and maintenance load easier is also worth looking at. So next slide. So I'm just going to end here with a handful of examples in the different modules. For the map module, we've really benefited from a collaboration with the cartography lab on campus and our state cartographer's office and the Robinson Map Library. And in particular, the cartography lab is able to kind of help us. They helped us, and we're side by side on this research that we did. Just a real couple short examples. One of them is we found that users really wanted a range of base maps, and in particular hybrid image maps, and they weren't found in a lot of atlases. So I think we can benefit our atlas by giving a broader choice of base maps to be able to use. And particularly, we might have to think about developing some custom base maps to really accentuate the coastal context, the shore, what's happening out in the water. Some base maps are kind of devoid of information there in some of those cases. And then we also saw that a lot of the ICAN maps that were being used in atlases were pretty basic. They were red dots and basic information was provided. We thought that we might be able to help to make those ICAN maps stronger by providing higher visual variables, for example, color, frame, and shape size, and those icons down below are examples of of icons that we're using in a coastal heritage tourism app that give a little bit more information and visual support for what you're clicking on. Next slide, please. And on the tools module, we're also trying to look at collaborations to improve the tools that are featured in our atlas, and our competitive analysis showed low uptake of decision tools in state coastal web atlases. And the user survey response said sometimes those tool modules don't match the primary coastal issues needed to be able to address adaptive coastal management issues. So we feel that we need to do some research out there to help find those proper tools and structure them the right way to support those kind of dynamic, adaptive issues that we're dealing on the coast, and that we might be able to provide better guidance to be able to show how those tools can actually be used in guiding decisions. Next slide. And one example here in the tools module of the NOAA Digital Coast, they provide some rich information to be able to help you decide what tools are available and how to use them more effectively. So that's pretty good guidance out there. Next slide. And then I wanted to move on to our catalog module. We have a great partnership with our state cartographer's office and map library on campus. And they were able, they created a resource using geo-blacklight technology called Geodata at Wisconsin. And one of the initial things they did in developing that was to kind of focus on coastal data. Our atlas originally had data sets available, and this collaboration has kind of given us over 1,000 data sets. So by an order of magnitude, more data that's relevant to decision makers out there. And then from a kind of a management side, I'm finding that for some of my applications, it's been a little bit easier to use ArcGIS Online to be able to develop and author some of those data sets, particularly with that coastal heritage tourism app that we have out there. And that may be something that we do a little bit more of for some of our own personal kind of Sea Grant oriented data. Next slide. And then finally, ending up with the Learn module here, we've really found that there's been a lot of attention on that module, and it's providing place-based learning resources out there. I think that throughout our user survey, of those state atlases, people noted the opportunities to be able to improve learnability about atlases through story maps and other narrative forms. And so we've started adding more story maps in our Learn module that really focus on more real world and problem-based case studies. And we've worked on creating some innovative story maps by pairing coastal domain experts and cartographic and GIS specialists to develop those. And that's been a good combination. They really kind of magnify each other's expertise and develop some really interesting products. That one on the lower right, that Groinfield story maps, actually won a few awards, and it was a combination of a cartography GIS and a coastal engineering undergraduate student mentored by myself and my colleague, a coastal engineer here who works at Sea Grant. And then just ending, here, we created some Great Lakes quests, some learning quests that allow people to go out and experience some coastal issues through story maps. And we link them with Qualtrics surveys so that they can answer clues and kind of, it's kind of an exciting way to be able to kind of gather clues and answer some questions and learn in the same process. And so we're really excited about these Great Lakes quests. And so next slide. And then just ending here, there's that link to the presentation files and link to our atlas. And if there's time for a question, I'll try to do that, but I'm probably looks like I'm right at 0 right now.
David, you can tell that you're a lecturer. You're on split timing there, so well experienced in this. I just have one quick question. You mentioned at the beginning that you were essentially sort of inspired by John Wright and by the kind of the early days of ICAN, or even the forerunners of ICAN, in developing the atlas. So maybe to address a question we had in the first part of the session, what do you see as maybe the primary or the main benefit of networks such as ICAN to atlas developers such as yourself and your team?
Yeah. Well, first, to be able to talk to people, I think that was brought up earlier. I'm talking to Tanya fairly often. That relationship kind of continues, and she's kind of my go-to person to ask for technology issues. And so, so I think that strengthening those interpersonal connections is always strong. And I think that I think the other thing for me has been being able to be part of the experiments that ICAN does over the years. That interoperability experiment that we had earlier on, and kind of connecting Oregon and Ireland's atlas, and being able to kind of jump in with our atlas and kind of look at the technologies to be able to support that. And some of the guidebooks and the cookbooks that have come along have been very helpful. I really look forward to when they come out. So those have been great resources for me and guiding me as I've gone along.
Great. And I just take one question here that came in from Freya Nallis. She asks, did you outsource the user survey to a user experience expert, or was it conducted in-house?
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of both, right? So it was a partnership with a faculty member, Robert Roth, in the geography department here. And I think he is a bit of a user experience expert. And so you could see his influence in the survey and the materials that we developed. He's a cartography visualization expert. And then his student, Tim Presby, did a lot of the on-the-ground working. And so I think we ended up with a really nice looking survey in Qualtrics that benefited from that user experience that Rob and Tim had. So thanks for the question.
Thank you very much, David, for the presentation. And that brings us to the end of the formal presentations for today.